Are child care expenses factored into child support? Hi, I'm Alicia Kinchlow, a family law attorney based out of the Philadelphia area and the owner of Kinchlow Law, where we practice primarily divorce, child support, and custody. All right, so today's question is going to be about child care expenses and child support. And basically, how does it get factored into your child support calculation? The first thing to kind of understand is how child support is calculated. So when there's two parties for support, and they don't have to be parents necessarily. So that's why I try to say parties and not parents. But when you have two parties, the court is going to take the monthly net income of each party and put it together to determine what the child support obligation is going to be. Now, your net income is not what we think about as just what is on our paychecks, because there's a lot of things that come out of our paychecks that actually don't get factored into your net income calculation. So what the court will do is generally start with your gross income. And so they'll typically ask you for the last 6 months of pay stubs. If you've had several jobs or businesses, they may ask for different other ways of getting your income information. They often ask for your W-2 forms and your tax returns as well. And they're going to look at your income basically from all places. So that includes, again, not just your salary from your job, but if you drive for Uber or Lyft, if you have a business, if you have income producing rental properties, all of those things are things that can be used to determine what your income is, and then some. There's another video that we've done before that also talks about the different types of income, things that you may not realize are income. So things like bonuses, unemployment income, commissions are all things that can also be included as part of your income for child support purposes. So once the court has made a determination of what all your income sources, they will determine what your net income is, and then certain expenses are going to come out. Again, same thing. All expenses are not included, so union dues are part of the things that are coming out of your gross income. So these are things that typically you don't have a choice whether or not to pay. Certain types of court fees for maybe a criminal case can come out of there. And then there are certain adjustments that are made and deductions that are made. So then we talk here about maybe medical insurance. For example, if one party is paying the medical insurance for the children, that can be included as well as a particular deduction. Now, an adjustment that's also is made is the child care expenses. So when we talk about child care, we are looking at what type of child care a child needs to have to allow a parent to work, find work, or if permissible, go to school. Okay. So if a person is not working at all and they are still incurring child care expenses, it's very possible that you may not be able to have that child care expense included and as part of the child support obligation, because there really is no need for it. If you're just choosing to send the child to school, it may not be included. So that's an important thing to kind of look at. If you are trying to find work, so you have to put your child in daycare so that you can do that, that can be a little bit different. So you want to make sure, depending on which side of the case you're on, that you're looking at the evidence from all of those standpoints. All right, the next thing is the child care cost reasonable? And that comes down to what are some of the going rates for child care services in the area. Is the party entitled to a subsidy? Are they receiving a subsidy? That greatly changes the amount. Is the amount for the child care tuition or fees, does it greatly exceed what that person's ability to pay is, period? You know, we all want the best for our children, and sometimes people equate the best with being the most expensive. But if you're unable to afford it, you can't generally just make the other person pay for it because you like that particular child care services. It has to be a reasonable cost. And so that also comes into play when we're talking about things like having family members watch your children. So again, this sometimes is a workaround. Quite honestly, people will say that they're paying their family members to watch their children. They're not. Sometimes they're just pocketing the money themselves. Other times they really are paying the family member to watch the child. And if they're charging a reasonable amount for that service, often the court will actually say that it's okay. Now you want to show or have some type of proof that the money is being paid to this other person. A note from from them is not enough. I would challenge that as an attorney on the other side, whether or not that is actually any type of reliable evidence that you're actually paying these expenses to that person. So things like cash apps on a regular basis, checks, cancel checks, money orders, other things that you can actually show some type of receipt for would be helpful to be able to show that you actually do have this expense. And if they're going to a licensed daycare center, that should be something that's really easy for you to be able to get. So you want to make sure, again, depending on what side you're on, either you're asking for that evidence or you're showing that evidence so that you can establish that as proof. Now, once the court says, hey, $100 a week is a very reasonable expense for a child of this age, and a parent does need to work. So we're going to say, $400, $450 a month, because everything is generally done on a monthly basis, is a reasonable expense for childcare. That gets added on top of the child support obligation. So going back to kind of how I talked about calculations, and again, I'm going to do another video on kind of going all the way through the calculation system. But once the court has taken the monthly incomes, they look at how many children and taken all the other relevant deductions. They will look at what it costs, well, with that amount of income from both parents and the number of children that are in this particular order. They will look at the guidelines, and the guidelines will say how much it costs or is needed to support this many children in this family earning this amount a month. Okay, and then that amount is split based on the incomes of the parties. So if the parties have a 60-40 split in terms of their incomes contributing to that big amount, that whole amount, then one party is responsible for 60%, the other party is responsible for 40%. And then the determination of where the money goes is based on who has the children primarily and how the incomes are paid. So let's say mother has primary custody of the children, and dad's income is 60% of that total pie. Then dad would be paying 60% of that total support amount that came from the guidelines. Once that amount is determined, then the child care gets added on top of that, and it is split again based on the income amounts, the percentages of the parties. So dad would be responsible for 60% of the child care cost, so that $450 that we just talked about. Dad would be responsible for 60% of that, and mom would be responsible for the other 40%. So that's going to come out of the money that she's already earning. And then that can get added on, and then there's a total, again, with any other deductions or expenses that need to be added in, there's a total support obligation that reflects the child support obligation and then the added expense of the daycare expense. And that's all put together, usually all together at one time in the support obligation order. Now, there are certain situations where the child care cost is not added into the child support obligation. Instead, the parties are directed to pay the child care expenses directly to the child care center. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Maybe mom, if mom is supposed to pay, she's not paying timely. Maybe dad has always paid it and has an arrangement. Maybe dad is the primary person on the account for the school or child care center. There could be a host of reasons. Maybe the parties share custody 50%, and they want to be able to each pay their 50% directly to the school instead of it going to the child support obligation. So there's a number of reasons for it to be done a different way. Just because typically it's added onto the child support obligation doesn't mean it has to be. And quite frankly, when a child ages out of childcare and then goes to public school, you have to remember to go back and get a modification to get that amount taken out. And so sometimes that can take several months before that is even adjusted. So that might be another reason too, to make sure that you're looking at the way that the child support obligation includes or does not include the child care expense. All right, so I hope this gave you some information about the way that child care expenses are looked at with regard to a child support obligation. Again, I'm going to do a video on child support calculations because there's a number of things I really want to get into some detail with in terms of adjustments and deductions and just the way that some things are calculated or not included, things that we think would be included or not included in a child support obligation. As always, you want to speak to an attorney licensed in your area about the facts specific to your case, because there are a lot of nuances here that I could not cover in a short YouTube video, and that continue to change as laws continue to get passed and as case law. So as courts continue to examine different types of scenarios, and COVID has presented us with a lot of brand new scenarios. So there's a lot of things that continue to change, and that's why it's important to speak to an attorney who practices this type of law on a regular basis about the facts specific to your case. So make sure you hit subscribe, and make sure you come back again tomorrow for another video on divorce, custody, and support. And as always, leave me your comments. Let me know if this video was helpful to you and if there are topics that you would like us to cover. All right, until next time, take care.